I'm Jethro Jones from Transformative Principal, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Instant Relevance Podcast. The Instant Relevance Podcast is an educational podcast featuring the latest news and resources to make learning relevant for all students. Follow us on Twitter at InstantRel. I'm Denis Sheeran, author of Instant Relevance, using today's experiences to teach tomorrow's lessons, and Hacking Mathematics, 10 Problems That Need Solving. I'm a math teacher for 13 years and an administrator for 6, and I am excited to be podcasting.
I am Raymond Steinmetz, co-host of the Instant Relevance Podcast. I'm a K-8 math instructional coach from Rhode Island. I write and blog about a variety of topics related to education and parenting. You can find my work at www.blendedlearningmath.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at blended_math.
I am in my basement, as far away in my house from my wife as possible. And that is not because I don't love her. She's my favorite person in the world. It is because I make my living talking, and she has laryngitis. She got sick last week and felt a cold coming on, but it wasn't a cold. It was something else. And honestly has been without a voice for days. She even had to miss performing in one of her concerts that she's been preparing for months, which kills me. And it kills her. She was so excited to perform in this concert. And so instead, she just had to sit on the sidelines and kind of watch it. And it really got me thinking about, the power of our voice when our voice is available to us, and in a couple of ways. And she's a music teacher, so she's and a singer. She had to go into school to teach little kids without being able to speak. And so I guess my mini moment starts with a question to whoever's listening to this, and it is, how would you teach your class or your classes if you had no voice? And as you think about that, there's a couple of perspectives here. And one that I get was, wow, that would be so difficult. I'd have to figure out how to get my voice across. Maybe I would have to write something on the board or prepare slides or do something else to get what I needed to say out there, at least instructions, to all the way to the other side of it where someone would say, I don't know, it would be the same. My voice is barely used in my classroom. And there's a spectrum of good in both of those and bad in both of those. Where are we on that spectrum? And my wife being without a voice made me really think about that. Like, how would I do my job without my voice? And then how could my students do their job, be effective learners, without their voice in a time when we focus so much on student voice? So it really just got me thinking about it again. So really it's a question to our listeners. What would you do if you'd had no voice for a day or two? And what would you do if your students came in and just couldn't talk to you for a day or two? So what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think not having the ability to use my voice in the classroom is like a nightmare I probably had at one point. And I know I have sometimes these teacher anxiety dreams of things not exactly going very well in my classroom. And I think not being able to talk was probably one of them. But it's interesting. I think that we almost all should have that experience of, not being able to use something that we rely on consistently. I think that it kind of puts us in this, in the other person's shoes of someone with a disability who, there are plenty of people who, can't talk or, can't walk, and being able to put yourself in their shoes and maybe even into some of your students' shoes as well is probably a good thing, because it really gives us some perspective kind of outside of our own abilities. It's funny you say, not being able to talk as a teacher, because another thing that came to mind is the routines in my class, like early in my career, I felt like were so solid that I would actually try to go as long as possible, especially on quiz days, without talking at all. Or, I would use hands gestures and that sort of thing. I even talked in acronyms one time, and that was interesting. But it's interesting, how much the students are familiar with your class and the routines that you have in your class. It would be an interesting challenge to see how long you could go without speaking and how much they do rely upon you, because ultimately they should be the ones doing most of the work. So if you have those routines in place and they really do lead the learning, then maybe it would be a good try to not talk at all and see if you could communicate in other ways with technology or, with other types of blended learning practices, different applications or playlists or something like that. But would be actually an interesting practice for someone who's looking for moving from teacher-centered to student-centered, to actually take their voice out of the classroom completely and see what happens and see how the students adjust. I think that would be really interesting.
Well, if anybody out there in Instant Relevance Podcast land wants to take that challenge, then I would love to hear from you. Make sure you tweet us and tweet the @InstantRel Podcast. And I'd love to hear, what it's like for a day in your classroom when you made a choice to go without something, like go without your voice or go without your technology or go without your students' voices, and share those messages. And if you blog, definitely write about it and share that with us too. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks for checking into today's Make It Real Instant Relevance Podcast mini moment. And we hope you stick with us for our next episode.